Okay, hi again. It's Alan Gabonik here again, continuing with backyard birds. This time we'll look at some migrants and some winter birds. Again, if you want to write these down, or somehow if you can take a picture of the screen or whatever, copy these down. We have about 12 different birds we're going to talk about here. And I'm just going to move on, and of course we'll mention the names of the birds as we go along, but if you want to stop the video at this point and write these down, feel free to do so. But here I go. I'm really only going to mention, I think, 3 migrant birds on the list. The first one is called the Rufous Hummingbird. And here you can see rufous again, meaning reddish brown. Look at all the rufous coloration on this bird, all across the head, the face, down the back, as we'll see in a minute, even some underneath there with this white, almost kind of like a collar going across there. The gorget, when you see it just right, really has a brilliant color to it. And we'll show you that in a minute. But here's the bird showing all that rufous down the back and the tail and so on. You see why it's called the Rufous Hummingbird. Now, this is a migrant bird here in northern Nevada. They migrate through here to go north in the spring. And they only come through, I don't know, maybe a week or 2 at the most. And I've never seen any in my yard. They seem to be more common along the foothills on the western side of the city. So I've got these pictures when I was on a camping trip out in central Nevada at one point. Again, it's a hummingbird, 3.5 inches long, not very big. You can see his gorget flowing back here, but you can't see the color because the light isn't hitting it right. If it hits you at the right direction, the gorget looks like that. Now, I'm cheating here because this isn't the Rufous Hummingbird. This is one that looks similar to it called the Allen's Hummingbird, which is common over in California. But I'm showing it because I wanted to show you the gorget color, and that's kind of the color that the Rufous Hummingbird male has. The Allen's Hummingbird, on the other hand, has got a green back, so that's one way to recognize an Allen's over in California from a Rufous Hummingbird. So over here, the Rufous Hummingbirds are going to be all rufous. However, there are some individual Rufous Hummingbirds that can have green spots in the back or even a green back, but it apparently occurs only at a certain time of the year. And I think, you have to check me on this, but I think it's primarily over in California where you have that problem. Over here, look for a completely rufous colored hummingbird, except for that white that we saw on the breast. In the late summer, kind of like mid to late August and into September, hummingbirds start migrating through again. They're going south. And I get these birds that to me look like Rufous hummingbirds, either females or immature males. You see all the rufous on them there. This looks like it might be maybe an immature male that's starting to get a gorget. I can't tell on this one, but I get a lot of these birds coming through the yard that have a lot of rufous on them. And I don't know, I am terrible at recognizing female hummingbirds and immature male hummingbirds. So you're just going to have to try to learn them on your own, I guess. This is an Anna's hummingbird. Now, when I first moved to Reno in 1970, you never heard of any Anna's hummingbirds over in Reno. They were always over in California. But now they're showing up more and more frequently. And I apologize, I do not have good photos of them. These are all kind of yucky photos. But at any rate, again, if the light doesn't hit the gorget right, you don't get the color. But if it does, man, you get this really bright rose-colored, not only in the gorget, but also on the head. So keep that in mind. Anna's hummingbird, the color also goes onto the top of the head. I know people in Reno who have had Anna's hummingbirds hanging around their feeders all winter long. And I know of some friends who have Anna's hummingbirds now nesting in their yards or in their neighborhoods in Reno. So now they're getting to be not just a migrant bird coming through, but also sometimes staying around and breeding. So there's a male, bright pink or rose-colored gorget and head, crown. Here's another one that migrates through called the broad-tailed hummingbird. Now, these guys actually breed in Nevada, but probably more out to eastern Nevada than here. They also have a rose-colored gorget like that. slightly different color, but notice how green the rest of the bird is, including the head. Again, light doesn't hit the gorget right, it looks black. All greenish all over the back of the body and the tail with some rufous in the tail. So if you see one of these with a gorget, how do you know if it's a broad-tailed or an anise? Look at the head. Remember, the anise hummingbird has all that pink on the top of the head along with the gorget, whereas in the broad-tailed hummingbird, it's only the gorget that has the color. The head is green. Okay? So these are the three migratory birds I wanted to mention. Now, there's a lot of other migrants that come through here, but I didn't want to include them in this section. Now I'm going to turn to wintering birds. When winter gets here, fall into winter and at least early spring, some of these birds, the dark-eyed juncos, will come down either from farther north where they were breeding, or they might do what we call an altitudinal migration, where they come down from higher altitudes, or I should say elevational migration, from higher elevation down to lower. Black head on the male, contrasting with a flesh-colored beak or pinkish beak, some orangish along the sides and some on the back. The amount of orange will differ in individuals, but notice a black tail with white outer tail feathers. That's characteristic of the juncos. There are several different subspecies of juncos. The one we commonly get here is called the Oregon junco. Dark-eyed junco, for obvious reasons, or Oregon junco. Here's another look at an Oregon junco. Notice how much of the orangish color is on the sides here and the flank, and the amount up there extending onto the head. But again, the dark head contrasting with the pinkish beak. The males are the ones that have the dark heads and breast. The females are lighter colored. They have sort of grayish on the head and breast. Males are more blackish. But even in the females, it contrasts with the color of the beak. Again, white outer tail feathers, white outer tail feathers. 6 1/4 inches. So it's a dimorphic species. They basically feed on the ground, although they'll come to the hopper feeders, and they'll even come to your finch feeders. So this is a dark-eyed junco, obviously a male, down on the ground, and here's what I think is probably a female, because the head doesn't look that dark to me. And sometimes it's really hard to tell. The head sometimes looks halfway in between a light-colored female and a dark male. Another good look at a dark-eyed junco, this one being a male. I pointed out the white outer tail feathers. If you're walking along, say in a forest somewhere out in the woods, and you see a small dark brown bird with a black head fly up from you, you'll see it open its tail and flick those white tail feathers. That's the characteristic. It tells you it's a dark-eyed junco. We think by flicking those white tail feathers, they might confuse any kind of a bird predator that might be coming after it. Another common winter visitor that I get here in my yard every winter is the white-crowned sparrow. Again, these guys might be doing an elevational migration coming down from higher elevations, or they might be coming from northern breeding grounds coming down through here. The white-crowned sparrow is named for obvious reasons. On the crown of the head, you've got this white, bordered by a black stripe, and then there's a white supercilium and a black eyeline. And then the rest of the bird is sort of grayish down to the undersides, brownish with brown and white streaks on the back and the wings and so on. And again, the head and the rest of the body contrast from this kind of pinkish or flesh-colored beak. It's one of the larger of our sparrows, 7 inches in size. Like just about all sparrows, they're monomorphic. You can't tell male from female, but here's a nice head-on view of an adult male, of an adult period, not just male, but an adult. You see the black and the white. Same thing over here. Notice the striping on the back, and then kind of no stripes on the lower part of the back, and so on. They'll come to your finch feeder too, especially if you have a tray like that for them to catch the food. Here is an adult white crown next to an adult male house finch, about the same size, 3/4 of an inch larger. Now, a lot of people think this is a female white-crowned sparrow, but it's not. This is the first-year bird, the juvenile bird. Instead of having the black and white stripes, it's got these brown stripes with an eyeline and a pale eyebrow. During the whole winter, these young birds maintain this so-called juvenile plumage throughout the winter. So that's not male and female here. This is an adult, either a male or a female, can't tell. And this is an immature bird, okay? Here's a immature white-crowned sparrow next to who? Can you tell me? Can you tell me? 7 inches, 6¼ inches, orangish streaks on the back. This eyebrow here. This is a female house sparrow, remember? This is the immature white-crowned sparrow. Now, as you get towards the end of winter, early spring, if you've got any immature white-crowned sparrows in your yard, check them out. They start to molt into their adult plumage. See the brown winter plumage there and the white, black and white stripes coming in. This guy's molting into his first adult plumage. You can really see it on this bird. There's the brown streaks from the winter plumage, and now they're starting to get their spring plumage coming in, black coming in, white coming in. Ragged. You see these little, what look like pins here? When the feathers start coming out, they're surrounded by a shaft and look like little pins. So we call them pin feathers. So when the birds are molting, you can often see these pin feathers on the face and the head, and they can look pretty raggedy. So that's a immature white-crowned sparrow molting into its first adult plumage. Now another sparrow that looks similar to the white crown, but differs in the head color, this is the golden crowned sparrow. And I get several of these in my yard every winter. And I remember when I first moved to Reno in 1970, hardly anyone ever mentioned seeing golden crowned sparrows in the Reno area. Now I guess they're getting more common, either that or there's more people out birding and discovering them. I'm not sure which. But the golden crowned sparrow, named for obvious reasons. That yellow on the head that has a golden color. The color gets duller in the winter. When they molt into their winter plumage, it's not quite as bright. When they molt into their breeding plumage, then the head really turns bright yellow. So here is a golden crowned sparrow in its winter plumage compared to a white crowned sparrow here. You can easily see the difference in the head plumage. Remember I said birds can look pretty cruddy when they're molting? This is a golden crowned sparrow molting at the end of winter into its breeding plumage. And boy, look at all the pin feathers that are sticking out there and how ruffled and rough the head looks. They can look pretty bad when they're in the middle of molt, but that's a golden crowned sparrow molting into its breeding plumage. Another winter bird that we can get here is the Cassin's finch. Looks a lot like the house finch. Cassin's finches are usually up in the forest and usually higher than house finches, but you can find them both in the same habitat from time to time. 6¼ inches, dimorphic, just like the house finch is. So if this guy looks like a house finch, how do you tell it apart from a house finch? Well, Cassin's finch, remember I said house finches have red only on the forehead. Cassin's finches, the entire head is red, the entire crown. Just like house finches, they've got all this coloration on the chin and throat and down under the breast, and they've got it also on the rump. And boy, in the breeding season, some of them can really, really look reddish all over, unlike a house finch. House finches would have a bunch of brown streaking down in here. So let's compare a Cassin's finch to a house finch, at least the males anyway. There's the red all over the head, and unlike house finch, Cassin's finch can raise those feathers up in a crest. House finches do not. Remember, the house finch coloration is only on the forehead and then sweeping over the eye like a supercilium. Here in the Cassin's finch, red all over the head. And sometimes the red looks like it'll kind of spread throughout all of the feathers on the back too. Here's another house finch, only red on the forehead, okay? Another characteristic of the Cassin's finch is that it has a clear breast and belly. Notice the house finch down here. See all this streaking on the lower, well, actually from the mid to the lower belly and out on the flanks. There are no streaks on the breast and belly of the Cassin's finch. They can have some along the flanks, but they don't have it on the breast and belly. And there's the full head of red. The whole head is red, as opposed to just the forehead on the house finch. Now, this gives you a good look at the clear breast and belly of this Cassin's finch that was disputing its place with this other Cassin's finch. Here's a male Cassin's finch, so see the crest, raises the feathers up on the crest. The female looks like a female house finch, but she too has a crest. And it's kind of been my experience that in the female Cassin's finch, all the streaking on the underside tends to be thicker streaks, heavier, thicker streaks, much more fine streaks on the house finch, but that's just my impression. She has that, has the crest, and she can lower it too. See, there she just lowered it down there. Another way to tell if you're not sure is look at the top of the beak. That midline that runs along the upper mandible is called the culmen. Okay, the culmen, the middle ridge. Cassin's finches have a straight culmen, or if you want, a straight upper mandible. House finches have a curved culmen, or the upper mandible is curved, if you want to say it that way. There it is, curved on that one. This is a female house finch, and you can see the curve on her mandible there. Here is a Cassin's finch male. See how straight the culmen is? Clear breast and belly. It's got a crest. Out of focus, but back here you recognize that as a male house finch. There's the forehead and eyebrow. Notice how curved the culmen is on that bird, okay? So if you can't figure out anything else, try to look at the beak and see if it's a straight upper mandible, straight culmen, or a curved upper mandible. Straight is Cassin's finch, curved is house finch. Now, if you're anywhere near a forest, particularly a pine forest, like up on the Mountain Rose Highway and so on, you'll probably very commonly get these guys in the yard, the mountain chickadee, named for its call, chickadee, chickadee, chickadee-dee-dee. Small, 5 1/4 inches, so small as a warbler. They're monomorphic, can't tell male from female. Here's another look at it, that bold black and white pattern on the head and face, a black bib, chin and throat, partially on the breast, and black on the crown, what we call this a ladder, well no, that's a supercilium over the eye and then the black eye line, and then white on the face extending up to the back of the neck, all clear undersides here. Small grayish bird with that black and white pattern on the head. And you might notice, see that fleshy gape there? This is a immature bird or a juvenile that just came out of the nest not long before we actually caught this bird when we were out banding birds. So that's a fledgling right there. Mostly grayish all over the rest of the body. Very, very easy to recognize with that black bib and the black and white facial pattern and head pattern. Let's see, the kids, trying to remember what the kids call this bird up in Tahoe. The bird, its song is fee, bee, bee, fee, bee, bee, and they call it the, I can't remember. You'll have to give me a call and ask me if I finally remember what it's called. Sorry. Again, if you're near a forest somewhere, you're going to get possibly three different species of what we call nuthatches. Nuthatches are small birds. You can see 5 3/4 inches is the largest of the three. They've got these chisel-like bills, which they use to chisel out nuts from pine cones. And then they'll take them over and they'll stick them in kind of a crevice like this in bark, and they'll hack at it to open it up and get to the kernel inside. And we think the fact that they hack at a nut, hack, that somehow gave us the word nuthatch. Okay, nut hack, a nuthatch. Right? So they've got these chisel-like bills with that lower mandible kind of curving upward. Short, stubby, square-cut tails. These guys are known as the acrobats of the bird world, all nuthatches, because they can climb on top of a branch, they can climb upside down on a branch, they can go down a tree head first, they can go up head first, and so on. Really acrobatic. They can hang underneath pine cones while they're hacking the pine cones out of there and so on. This is the bigger of the three nuthatches. It's called the white-breasted nuthatch for obvious reasons. And with that white around the face and the breast, that black beady eye just sticks out really easy. Notice the black bar here on the back. And then the rest of the bird is just kind of bluish gray with that grayish square-cut tail. There's another look at it from the undersides. All clear whitish underside. There's that black beady eye sticking out surrounded by white. And the undertail colors, remember the chrism? The chrism is kind of chestnut colored. Again, look at that short square cut tail. You can often see them down on the ground, going down pursuing whatever they can find on the ground. There's that chisel-like beak. This guy is molting. You can see how scruffy he looks. And there's the chestnut crisp. Black on the head, white on the face, and so on. Whitish underneath, which kind of looks kind of scruffy from this view. The white-breasted nuthatch. The middle size, 4.5 inches, is the red-breasted nuthatch, named for obvious reason, the red on the breast. And it too has a black and white pattern on the head, black on the crown, white supercilium, black eyeline, white on the face, and so on. That kind of always reminds me of a mountain chickadee. So, generally monomorphic birds, the nuthatches. There is a way to tell some males from females, but they're not really distinctly monomorphic. Again, notice the square cut, short tail. Side view, classic view of a nuthatch, in this case a red-breasted nuthatch, going down the tree trunk head first, or hanging up like this with that beak getting ready to hack away at some pine nuts. From the back, looks like this. Gold, black, and white, grayish on the back, just another kind of grayish upper sides, reddish on the breast and undersides. Black and white pattern on the head. Nuthatches are primary or secondary cavity nesters. That means primary cavity nester means they dig the hole themselves. Secondary cavity nesters means they'll go find a hole that was used by some other bird the previous year, and they'll take it over and nest in it themselves. So woodpeckers are primary cavity nesters, and they're really important for providing nest holes for secondary cavity nesters like these nuthatches. The smallest of the three is the Pygmy Nuthatch, named because it's so small, 4¼ inches, not much bigger than a hummingbird. All clear on the undersides again, a grayish bird on the upper sides with a small kind of grayish bluish square cut tail, but the head is brownish and there is a dark eyeline, and there's usually kind of a brown spot at the nape of the neck, which you don't always see. Sorry about that. There's another view of it on top of a branch. Again, monomorphic, just small. You usually hear these guys before you see them. They you hear this peep, 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 peep. And they'll often travel in flocks, especially in the wintertime. And you know, like I say, you often hear them before you see them. Another view of a Pygmy nuthatch coming down head first. And here's one, acrobatic, hanging upside down, looking for insects over there in the pine needles and so on. Pygmy nuthatch, smallest of the three nuthatches. My friend Georgia Roars, living up at the along the Mount Rose Highway, had this Pygmy nuthatch coming to her a nut feeder, and a Pygmy nuthatch here with a red-breasted nuthatch at the same time. So that's it for winter birds. Now we'll move on to other possible species.